Hello everyone, it's Shannon here for Hero Arts. In today's video, I will demonstrate 3 stencil techniques featuring the Large Sprinkled Dots Stencil. These techniques can also be used with other stencils as well, but the third technique does work particularly well with stencils with circles. We'll then use these techniques to create 3 holiday cards featuring products from Hero Arts' November release. Let's start with the Large Sprinkled Dot Stencil itself. This is a 6x6 stencil, and I believe this design can work for a lot of different occasions. We're using it for holiday here, but I could see New Year's, birthday, baby showers, or just general backgrounds. I'm going to start with an A2 panel of white cardstock and this soft olive ink, which is actually from the olive green core ink cubes. I'll then load up my medium ink blending brush, and we're going to create a gradation over this panel. I want it to be darker at the top and lighter towards the bottom, so I'm going to be a little bit more heavy-handed at the top. I did want to kind of tap off some of my excess ink here on a scrap piece of paper to kind of reduce some of the marks that I might make from my blending brush from not being so careful or light-handed as I should be. Luckily, all those imperfections are going to be hidden because we have additional layers that we are going to apply over this panel. This is just our first layer. Now that I've finished that gradation, I'll then place down our stencil. I'll grab pieces of tape to hold it in place, and then I'll ink blend again with that soft olive. I am ink blending a gradation as well, so it's again darker at the top and lighter at the bottom, but I am being a little bit more heavy-handed because I want some contrast between these 2 layers. I definitely want these circles to show up. So that's our second layer complete. I've cleaned the stencil, and now I'm going to give it a little turn. I just want to make sure that these circles don't line up. I want some variation in where they're falling, so I just turned it and actually slid it over a little bit more. I've now moved on to unicorn pigment ink, and I'm going to ink blend with this beautiful white pigment ink over the stencil to create our third layer. And actually, when we're done with this layer, you could stop here because we are kind of going for a bouquet background, and it looks amazing once this with just this final layer of the unicorn pigment ink. I think you've got lots of interest and depth there, but we're going to take it one step further, and we are going to use some hero paste. So again, I'm going to make sure my stencil is a little bit off from some of my previous layers, and then tape it in place, and then use this beautiful gold Hero Arts hero paste over the stencil to add our final layer. This adds some beautiful shine as well as some texture, pushes kind of our previous layers back a little bit more, and we will finish this card with a fairly simple, definitely tone on tone focal point. But before we can get to that, we do need to make sure this paste is completely dry. So once I finish applying the paste here, I'll then remove the stencil tape and set my panel aside to dry completely. I'll also make sure I clean my stencil, my grip mat, as well as my wonderful palette knife well before we move on to our next panel. So here you can see that beautiful panel. Love the texture and shine. Very gorgeous bouquet background. So now we're moving on to an A2 panel of Bermuda cardstock. So we have some colored cardstock here. And I'm going to grab this blue raspberry reactive ink from the C Palette Reactive Ink Cubes pack. And then I'm going to actually colorize this Hero Arts white pearl paste. This is an awesome, fun thing that you can do with the hero pastes. You can colorize the paste with any ink. It doesn't have to be reactive. It could be dye ink or even pigment ink. And I think even if you have a reinker, that would be even better than using it from your ink pad, because the more color you can add, the more intense the colorization of the paste will be. And I do think it works best with the white or the pearl, but of course you can do it with the gold as well. It does work with the gold. It's just the white and the pearl, you're starting with a white base, so your color is going to be more true to what the ink is, the color of the ink. So now that I've kind of mixed the paste and the ink together and have tinted it a bit, I think I'm satisfied, and I'm now going to apply it to my panel. I'm actually going to try to create a little bit of a gradation here. And after this dried, I do realize I probably should have added a little bit more color to my paste so the gradation was a little bit more prominent, but I still love the tone-on-tone look, the more subtle look, and it does definitely add a beautiful shine because this white pearl has that beautiful kind of pearl shine or pearl finish once it dries. So I'm grabbing some of the white here, and this is where I'm attempting to make it have a little bit of a gradation. So I wanted to lighten up my paste a little bit with some white, and just for my bottom half, apply that lighter tinted paste at the bottom. And that will actually, once I kind of get all the openings kind of covered with the paste, we are done and we can set this panel aside to dry. I love the contrast though of the paste with the dark colored cardstock. Look at that beautiful shine as well. Really pretty. So that's drying. While those two panels are drying, we're going to work on our third and final panel and our third technique. Now this technique, if you remember at the beginning, is best for circle stencils, but like the previous techniques could be done with any stencil that you have. This is kind of a bubble technique, but we're going to use it to create ornaments. I'm starting off with blue raspberry, and I'm ink blending the sides of the large circles first, and I'm visually dividing the circles, those large circles, up into thirds and concentrating that blue raspberry on a third, but again, just the sides. I want to keep the center of those circles as light as possible because that's going to be how we create that illusion that the circle is actually a sphere. And I will kind of get some color on the smaller circles. I'm not really worried about those kind of creating that illusion. I just want to make sure that I get some of the other ink colors on those other smaller circles as well. So now we've moved on to our second color, which is Splash. And again, I'm ink blending, starting with those larger circles and ink blending another third section, but keeping that color more concentrated at the edge of the circle. So it has starting to create that illusion of roundness. So again, it should be kind of lighter in the center and get darker as it works its way to the edge of the circle. And that's really going to create that illusion of roundness. And you see me here just kind of tapping in some of this splash color in on some of those smaller circles. Not as so worried about the smaller circles really kind of creating the illusion because they're so tiny that it's really kind of difficult to do. So now we're moving on to our third and final color, which is Blue Hawaii. And again, starting with that those larger circles and finishing off that final third with that new color. And all three of these colors are actually, again, from that C Palette Reactive Ink Cubes set that I showed earlier. And you may remember me mentioning this earlier, this is kind of a bubble technique. And if you just change your ink colors, so switch it to a pink, a yellow, and a blue, and then continue exactly how we've been doing here, ink blending the sides of your circle opening in your stencil, you'll actually create the look of bubbles. So a very fun technique to have in your tool belt. So now that I've finished ink blending that final color, we're actually all done with our stencil, and we're now going to move on to adding some additional elements to our ornaments. I'm going to use this fabulous gold deco color marker here to color the tops of all of these ornaments. Actually, not all of them. Some of them I will not actually color the tops, especially the smaller ornaments. In my mind, I'm envisioning these ornaments kind of falling down, and as they're falling, they're turning, and so sometimes you may not see, because of how they're turned, you might not see the actual top of the ornament. So some of these will not have tops, but I do focus on the larger ones adding tops, because the tops, adding that little gold is so pretty to have that little bit of shine and variation in color. So I focus mostly on the larger ornaments in general, but every once in a while I'll pop a little bit of gold on top to some of those smaller ornaments. So now that I've finished with my gold marker here, we're going to move on to our next addition or accent that we're going to add to our ornaments, and that is with a white gel pen. I am using a number 10 though. I just want to note that because gel pens, these white jelly roll pens, come in different sizes, different point sizes, and this is a 10, which is a little bit wider, and I found that I do not have any cloggings at all with the ink. This larger opening really has been a game changer for me. I've really enjoyed adding white highlights after I've got a pen that doesn't clog anymore for me. So if you've had trouble in the past, I definitely encourage you to try a Jelly Roll number 10. So all I'm doing right now is adding kind of a line to the side of the ornament. Sometimes I'll add even a little dot after the line. I'm not worried at all about light source. I just want to get one of these glare or highlights down onto the ornaments. Anywhere, any side, whatever one I will choose. It's kind of random here and there. I even add it to the teeny tiny ones, just a little dot, but this really does make them look shiny and more three-dimensional. And also, it's a great thing to add to this technique if you use it for bubbles as well, to add that little highlight in addition. So now we're finishing up these ornaments with our white gel pen again, but this time we're going to make little hooks on top of all those gold toppers. And this is really fast and totally a step you could skip if you wanted to, but I like the little bit more texture and interest that the adding the little hooks add. So now that I finished adding them, I'll pick this up and put it up to the camera so you can get a good look. Love the way it turned out. Very, very pretty. Now we're going to move on to creating some of our focal points for our 3 backgrounds that we've created. I have the new winter foliage pattern stamp here. I'm going to stamp it onto an A2 panel of white cardstock, but I am going to heat emboss, so I did apply some anti-static powder. Now I'm going to ink it up in Hero Arts embossing and watermark ink, and I will stamp the panel. This is a large stamp that's all one stamp, but it's a bunch of smaller images. It's a really pretty kind of background stamp, but you can also use it to build like a wreath, which is what we're going to do here, or create kind of your own focal points with the smaller images. There's a lot of fun things you can do with this awesome stamp set because there is a coordinating die that makes cutting out these images very, very easy. So now that after I've stamped the image several times in the embossing clear ink, I dipped it into some Hero Arts gold embossing powder and then heat set with my heat tool. Here you can see I have the winter foliage pattern cover plate die. This one die will cut out all of those images that we stamped. So awesome and easy, love that. You could use the leftover panel on another card, or later in the future use it with the winter foliage pattern stamp. So many possibilities with those awesome 2 products. But what I went ahead and did is I cut a really small circle with kind of a ring actually out of 2 circles from the Hero Arts nesting infinity die sets, and then I'm using that as kind of a anchor or a base to adhere all these beautiful die cuts onto. So this is how we're constructing our wreath. This is just the easiest way I found to kind of get these all arranged together and be able to pick it up and pop it up later. So now that I have all my die cuts glued to that ring, I'll then grab my foam adhesive and cut some strips here to add to the back side of my wreath so I can pop it up a little bit. I love adding a little bit of dimension, and using that ring, adhering my die cuts to that ring first just makes it so much easier. So now that I've finished adding my foam adhesive, I'm going to kind of put this card almost together. I don't have the sentiment ready quite yet, but we will go ahead. I did trim off about a little bit less than a 1/4 inch on both sides, the right and left sides. And now I'm going to center this panel on the front of an A2 top folding white card base. And once we have the panel stuck down, I'll then remove the backing on the foam adhesive that we've added to the back side of the wreath. And then I will stick it down to the card front once I figure out how I want it to be positioned on the card. And that will actually we'll almost be done with this card. We do have a sentiment we'll add later, so we'll set it aside. But do really love this kind of tone-on-tone look that we have here with all the gold and white. Very pretty and kind of surprising considering we use that soft olive ink in the background. Now we're moving on to our focal point for our second card. This is the Presence Tower Fancy Die. This is also new that came out with the Hero Arts November release. I went ahead and die cut the Presence Tower out of white cardstock and Hero Arts glitter gold cardstock. And now I'm going to fussy cut out some of the accents that are in the Presence Tower. So some of the tops of the presents, some of the bows of the presents. The die does most of the work. The die cuts out most of those elements. That I just have to kind of cut away a couple little basically almost like tabs that are connecting like the ribbon or the present tops together with the rest of our tower of presents. So just going to cut some of those elements away. Here you can see me, I'm working on this bow down here for one of the bottom presents. I'm just going to repeat this process for all the elements that I want to make glittery gold, I guess. After I finished fussy cutting those elements out, I'm just going to add some liquid glue to the backside and stick them down to that white tower of presents. That's kind of our base, and that'll just be a nice focal point, really, really pretty for our card front. I went ahead off camera and stamped 3 sentiments, actually all 3 sentiments that were included in the winter foliage pattern stamp set, stamped them onto white cardstock in embossing and watermark ink, then heat embossed them in gold embossing powder, and then of course trimmed them down to strips. We're going to finish up our cards here with our sentiments and our focal points and backgrounds, all of them, starting with this one here with the ornaments. I did trim this panel down just about 1/4 inch on the right side, and now I'll just adhere it down to my A2 top folding white card base. For this panel, I left it alone. I didn't trim it down. I'll just adhere it as well to our A2 top folding white card base. This one will get that beautiful tower of presents, so I'm going to go ahead and flip over that tower of presents here and start adding some foam adhesive to the backside, because I do want to pop this up because I love the beautiful shadows that little lift of adhesive provides, that foam adhesive provides. Once I've added the foam adhesive to the backside, I'll use my tweezers here to remove the backing, and then we'll just simply center this and stick it down to the card front. I do have 2 little leftover berries from the winter foliage pattern stamp set that we cut out earlier. Didn't use these for the wreath, so I decided they would be cute to add to the ribbons of some of our presents for a little bit more interest. And I just think they're so cute because I love when real life presents have little berries or sprigs of greenery attached to them. And then we finished just by popping up our sentiment and sticking it to our present tower. Now for our final card here, the one with the ornaments, I'm going to start by adding some foam adhesive to the back side of our sentiment. And then I have the 2 snowflakes that were also left over from our winter foliage pattern stamp set. I just popped those up with some foam adhesive and added them to the sides of the sentiment. And then for our final card with the wreath, which is actually our first card, I've added some foam adhesive to the back side of that sentiment and just placed it a little bit over the wreath. And that will complete all 3 of our cards. Here's that beautiful first card with the bouquet background. Actually our 3rd card with the ornaments, and this is our 2nd card with that colorized hero paste. So very fun, lots of texture, lots of layer and depth and shine as well. I hope you guys enjoyed these 3 techniques, these 3 stencil techniques that would work for lots of stencils. There's so much versatility with stencils. That's why they're one of my favorite products. And this large sprinkled dot stencil would work for so many different occasions and a bunch of other techniques. I hope you guys enjoyed today's cards and video. If you have any questions about the products I use, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.